good. I'm glad that worked. I was worried that wasn't going to work. Well, like he said, and I'm going to go ahead and pull out our handy dandy natural awakening so I get an idea about what we're talking about tonight. Greg, when he first talked to me about doing this, was on indigos. I profess to be an indigo. I believe that I'm an indigo. I believe that lots of us nowadays are indigos. This young lady here, and even some of you that are in your mid-30s, your mid-40s, you may be indigos. Now, indigos derive their name from their aura color. And I hope I have enough. I brought some handouts, and these are just basic information that I got off the internet, I got off websites, from different sites, and there's a lot of good information. One of the things that I do want to talk about a lot is the labeling of indigos. It's nice that we have a category that comes so that we can give people an idea that there's a new generation, that there's new evolution, that we are evolving as a consciousness as human beings, and we're moving forward. But we don't want to get stuck too much labeling. As people, as humans, we have an affinity for labeling. So, I want to make sure that we guys, keep a little gray area. Yes, I'm an indigo, but I also have traits that are close to crystal. I'm a Gen X, Gen Y, and I have traits that may be more baby boomerish. We're all a mixture of things. So make sure as you take the information tonight, take the information in as it resonates with you, okay? Because if it resonates with you, then that's something you want to pay attention to. And even if it resonates with you, if there's something I say that resonates with you in a negative way, pay attention to that too. Because the information is really about making connection with yourself and saying what resonates with you. Because it's your journey. This is your world. Each of you live in your own little world. And so you have to decide how you're going to traverse it. Can I borrow you? Would you be my helper?
Sure.
Could you hand me that? This is a fellow indigo here. She likes to see colors. Thank you very much. Now, like Lamont said, I have a varied background, and I'll give you a little bit about myself. I grew up as an Army brat, born in 1975 in Fort Riley, Kansas. Moved straight to Germany, stayed there until I was about 4, moved to Texas, parents divorced, moved to Georgia, moved back to Texas, moved to Germany, came here, finished high school, went to the military, and came back here, went to Colorado, did about 10 years, and now I'm back here again. Growing up, I felt fairly normal. I didn't have any idea that I might be different. I just knew that I didn't quite fit in. I got along with everybody, but I didn't quite fit in. So I didn't really have any basis to judge myself on, or any sort of labels, or any sort of kind of idea of why I felt different or what made me feel different. And it wasn't until I was 29, I was living in Colorado, my mother came up to Denver to the metaphysical fair. And we went to go see Daniel Brinkley. It was my first time meeting him. And I had my first aura picture taken. And I had meant to bring it, and I had a belt issue, so I was running around and forgot to grab my picture. But my first aura picture was actually just a small indigo halo with a little bit of white light here. And of all the aura pictures I've had taken and all the metaphysical fairs I've been since then, nobody has ever made a comment about my aura picture. Oh, pretty colors, things like that. But this picture, I got stopped 5 or 6 different times. People talking about the angels in my picture, and talking about color. Oh, you might be indigo. What's indigo? I hadn't heard of that term. I didn't know what that was. So that kind of started me on my path. I went home, I learned about indigos, I got online, I read books. And there's several books out there that are good. There's Indigo Child, Indigo Adult. These are good starting points. But to get kind of into the meat of what indigos are, and if you look at your handout, indigos are basically the new evolution of the new awakening consciousness. A good example would be, say, if you look at it technology-wise. Each new computer comes out with new software. It's got Wi-Fi. It's got, all the new setups you need for the new technologies. Indigo children, crystal children, rainbow children are the next evolution. They're coming in with a better connection to spirit, a more knowingness, they're more awake, they're more aware, and they're questioning. A lot of kids nowadays that are ADD or, I'm sorry, that are labeled ADD, ADHD, that are problem children. They're indigos, they're crystals, they're rainbows. They're these new generation of kids coming in. And the reason that they're disruptive, for lack of a better term, is that they see the big picture. They know things, they already know things, and we send them to a structured environment, we send them to an institutional school. It's a very linear, two-dimensional school. And these kids see in 3 dimensions. They understand things. And you put them in a curriculum that is boring. And so they get bored, and they act out, and they ask questions, because one of the biggest things about being an Indigo child or being a new person in the world is that things have to make sense to you. So you ask why, how come, what does this mean? And unfortunately, there's a lot of folks out there that are teachers that don't want you asking questions. They want you to absorb and regurgitate. So you get a lot of the medicating kids nowadays. And it's not that the kids are bad, it's not there's something wrong with the kids. The system is antiquated. And these kids are showing us the way to move forward. There's an unfortunate human tendency to hold on to the past. This is how we've done it for 100 years, this is how we're always going to do it. And, you know, if you don't adapt, you die. And these kids are coming along to help us adapt. They're awakening us to our consciousness, they're awakening us to our connection to source. They're showing us a new way, and they're asking questions, they're breaking the system. That's why they're rebellious. That's why, you know, they are getting in trouble in school, you know, not bringing home the best report cards. They're brilliant. The IQs in the world per capita have gone up about 200% in the past 50 years. And this has nothing to do with our school system. Because our school system has declined by probably about the same ratio. Not because there's something wrong with the kids or something wrong with the school system. It doesn't work for these kids. They don't match. So if you look at your handout, you'll get a basic overview of the general consensus on what indigos are, on what they're here to do. One of the things I was talking about with the group out in the restaurant earlier, try not to get too stuck on what you read on the internet. These people put out the best information they have at the time they have it. But just because it says all indigos are born after 1980, doesn't mean all indigos are born after 1980. Most of us have come in at a greater and greater population since 1980. But there have always been quote-unquote indigos. There have always been the rebels, the system breakers. You know, people like Joan of Arc, people like Martin Luther King. These people who come in and show you what's wrong with the system. They show a lot of traits that are similar to indigos. A lot of the kids now, and if you want to get real specific, you know, for a lot of my very engineer-minded folks, I would be considered a stage 2 scout indigo. And if you want to get that technical with it, you can. All that means is that there was a first wave of indigos that came in, and I am part of the second wave. And my job here is to educate and help pave the way for the next generation of indigos, and to help educate the people who aren't about who these kids are and why we're here and what we're trying to do. So, I mean, yes, you can go as scientific as you want about indigos and kids, but the general idea is that these kids do exist. Indigo is just a term, so that you can kind of label and understand, okay, my child is special because they have these traits, so I'll call them an indigo, or my child is special because they have these traits, and I'll call them a crystal. Okay? Don't get stuck on these titles, because as human beings, we are an amalgamation of all of our experiences, all of our societal, environmental, sociological, just, you know, experiences. So we're always more gray than black or white. So yes, I want you guys to learn as much about indigos, crystals, rainbow kids as you can. But don't get stuck on the terms. Just know that these kids are special and they have traits that we need to help develop. because it helps us. Because we are all part of the same field. You know, whether you want to call it God, whether you want to call it universal life force, whatever you want to call it, we are all connected. And there are lots and lots of experiments that have been done for the past 100 years that prove this. You know, there is a universal consciousness, you know, the 100 monkey theory or experiment. That is an example of our universal consciousness. And they've done tons of experiments. There was an experiment done on mice, where they had mice run a maze in England, and then they had mice run a maze in the States. And once the mice figured out the maze in England, the next mice in the States ran it the first time, straight through like they'd always done it. No physical connection. They were, you know, time zones apart, 8 time zones apart, and they still managed to do this. It's because we're all connected. We're all part of this universal field. And these new kids nowadays are tapped into that field. And if you have kids that you think might be special, you think might be indigos or crystals, have fun with them. Be supportive of them. These kids will tell you a lot. They will teach you a lot, but you have to be willing to learn. In my experience, one of the reasons I do this is because my father wasn't quite so open to learning anything from anybody younger. And there's nothing wrong with the guy. I chose him to be my father because I needed that experience. And so, not to demonize him, I don't want to talk bad about my dad, you know, up here in front of everybody. You know, I don't mean it like that, but in the experience with him, I wasn't given what I would consider that support. I wasn't understood the way I felt like I should be. And not because he was wrong or I was wrong or anything, but because he didn't understand. You know, luckily for me, my mother was very supportive of things. And it wasn't until I was turned 29, I learned that I was indigo and got into, you know, more metaphysical things that I really got to express, you know, and expand on these things. Up until that point, I just thought I was kind of weird. You know, everybody's weird. Weird is the new normal. So I mean, if everybody's trying to be normal, you know, like I said earlier, you know, the thing, normal is a setting on a dryer. You know, there's no normal. We're all weird. So growing up with this influence, I was never really heard. You know, I was kind of grew up in that very structured military family of kids are seen and not heard, you do what you're told, this is the way it is. And I tried to question in my younger years. It didn't go so well. So I quit questioning, and I kind of shut down and kind of went inside and withdrew a lot, which a lot of indigos do, a lot of new kids do. They withdraw. And they don't withdraw because they're antisocial. They don't withdraw because they're broken or dumb or have some other issue. They withdraw because it's a protective mechanism. You know, it's so that they will feel more normal. Because society at large doesn't necessarily accept new right away. So, you know, in my experience, I isolated, I tried to fit in. I hated my name growing up because of Friday the 13th. I wanted a new name. Everybody was Jason. And so I tried to be JB, Bo, this guy, that guy, whatever. But this was just me trying to figure out who I was. And I got real good at being a chameleon. I was very good. I could fit into any situation and look like I belonged. But I never felt like I connected. So I went from this situation, that situation, that situation. I got so good at it. And luckily, being an Army brat, we moved every 2 to 4 years. And I got to the point where I was excited about moving because I got to start over again. And I got to be this new person. I was never really a new person. All the same things happened within 6 months, and I was in the same place I was before because I was who I was. But because of my experiences now, because of the blessings of having my mother come take me to a metaphysical fair, which I have to tell you, my first metaphysical fair was a little weird. I went in there, I'm like, who are these people? Why do I like them? What is this about? It was a kindred spirit sort of thing. You know, like me nowadays, I have a day job. I work, you know, across the highway over here. But this is my passion. This is what I'm working so hard to do because you are my people. And we are one. I hope. If not, we'll be 2 or 3 days. So, but growing up this way, not being heard, not being supported, and growing with parents who were well-meaning, but they just didn't know what to do. And as all of you parents know, most times you don't know what to do. You may have a child who sees spirits. You may have a child who's psychic. You may have a child who has some other issue or some other talent that you don't know how to deal with. There's no rule book. You don't have to know how to deal with it. You just have to be supportive and just understand. In my experience, I've done all kinds of good, fun things. I've lived in all kinds of different places. I taught snowboarding for a bunch of years in Breckenridge, Colorado, and worked with a bunch of kids. And across the board, every one of the kids that had supportive parents, their parents didn't have to ski, they didn't have to snowboard. All they had to do was support them in what they wanted to do, which was driving the car, allowing them to go places, just giving them that kind of support. Those kids did much, much better. So as parents, as grandparents, as aunts and uncles, as brothers and sisters, as you encounter kids who have these indigo traits, who are special, just be supportive. You know, when they tell you they see a spirit, when they tell you they see grandma or grandpa, when they tell you they were grandma or grandpa, you don't have to believe them, you don't have to understand it, but just be supportive, because unless they're just trying to get your attention, they're probably trying to tell you something. And the most magical things happen when you allow these kids to kind of open you up. You know, once they get talking age, before they turn 7, ask them questions. Ask them who they were. Ask them what they know. You'll be shocked, surprised, and amazed at the things that kids will tell you. So, moving forward, does anybody have any questions at this point? Just any dying, I gotta ask questions right now. Okay. I want everybody to do something for me real quick. Go ahead and put your feet flat on the floor. Set whatever you got in your hands or in your lap, either in your lap or off to the side. Sorry. I just gotta get connected with you. We got everybody everywhere right now. If you will, close your eyes. Take a deep, slow breath. Just feel your feet on the floor. Feel your butt in the seat. Feel the air moving in and out. Oh, that's much better. You guys feel how that lightened up? Much better. All right, one more deep breath. Nice deep breath. Fill up your lungs, nice and slow. Breathe. You'll find 99.99% of your problems resolved by simply breathing. Okay, come on back. Does anybody have any questions now? Before we move forward. Okay, good. I'm going to get off the indigos a little bit, but realize everything I talk about tonight, whether it's indigos, law of attraction, stages of human growth, whatever, it's all interrelated. Nothing that we talk about, nothing in our world is not interrelated. Yes, sir?
I have a question. What made you jump to what was your breaking point to finally question yourself, and then how did you go about that? I know you said your mom was an instrumental part of that, but
Well, I don't think there was a point I don't think I can remember a point where I didn't question myself. That was just part and parcel of my life. I was always questioning why, how come, why don't I fit in, how come people don't see things like I see them, how come I know these things and nobody else knows them, how come I can tell people things without having any physical evidence, without going to school, without having been there. You know, and it's empowering at the same time as it is frustrating and debilitating when you tell somebody something that you just know. You just got the information from spirit, from the source, and you tell them that, and they go, how do you know that? I don't know, I just know. And then, well, you can't just know you heard that somewhere, or somebody told you that, or, you know, the usual explaining it away. So, there wasn't really a time where I wasn't questioning myself. It wasn't until I was 29 and went to my metaphysical fair and heard about indigos, and then read some of these same things that I've given you guys today, And I read that description and went, aha, you know, holy God, I've found myself, you know, and it was in that moment that it all kind of congealed. And the funniest thing is there was a guy, Alan, that I know will never remember me. He might see my picture one day and go, he looks familiar, but he will never remember me. But we were standing in line to go see our talk, and we were talking about some indigos or something or other, and he looks at me and goes, maybe you're an indigo. Maybe you should write a book. Thanks, Alan. You know, it's one of those divine things that, you know God's talking to you sometimes when the stranger goes, hey, da-da-da. You know, this guy turned around and he goes, oh, maybe you're an indigo. Maybe you should write a book. And that really lit a fire in my butt. And it kind of started me on this, whirlwind of experience. And in my experience, I've been lucky enough that I got to spend a lot of time with Daniel Brinkley, who is one of the foremost people with near-death experiences. You know, struck by lightning twice, don't talk on the phone, lightning storm, took him twice to figure it out, but, you know, through him, I got to meet Stan Romanek, who, some of the foremost abduction cases. You know, through them, through my mother and through trips and stuff like that, I got to meet all kinds of amazing people. So, I mean, I know we live here, and, you know, we may be a little starving for attention in our little groups here, but there's people out there, and they're coming. You know, there's lots of good folks. So, I mean, once you open the door, once you find that kind of had your aha moment, which I'm sure a lot of you had your aha moments which brought you here, or somebody just dragged you. Either way, you're here. But there's a community out there. There's a lot of us out there. You know, I met this guy Thomas on Facebook. He found me because he saw the ad. You know, that's how we connect. You know, the internet is our new best friend. You know, we get to connect, we get to be with each other, we get to communicate with each other. And no matter what the government's trying to do, no matter what the people behind the government's trying to do, no matter what the banks are trying to do, no matter what anybody's trying to do, we get to congeal as a community and help each other out. So, I mean, as you move along, as you grow up, as you keep doing what you're doing, know that there are people out there. So I know for a lot of us, a lot of indigos, a lot of light workers, a lot of first wave, second wave people, there's a disconnection. You know, they feel different, they feel misunderstood, they feel alone, and they don't know, they don't understand why they feel that way. And which is why I'm trying to get my second book out, because I cover some of that, but that'll come out soon. I'm really bad at self-promotion, sorry. But
when does the second book come?
I'm in talks with the lady in England that does my typesetting right now. I just gotta pay her, and then she'll do her magic, and then hopefully within soon, very soon. The dentist got most of my money this week, so we're gonna wait another week. But as we move forward, and, you know, in our explorations, we realize that we're not alone, and we are connected. So, with what I call the human condition, we live in this dichotomy of humanism, that we are these eternal, expansive, spiritual beings in itty bitty living space. You know, we live our little, we live in our little bodies. You know, these are our, for lack of a better term, our little spacesuits that we come in as spirit, and we animate and we walk through life in for experiences. And it's difficult for us, especially when you're a light worker or an indigo child, or someone who's a little more connected to spirit, to kind of deal with that dichotomy of, well, I feel so much more than what I see and what I experience right here. And so it causes a lot of discord. So be gentle with yourselves as you move along through your life. Be gentle with the kids, and just know that there is support. There are people out there. There are people just like you out there. And as we congeal and come into community, we'll have a lot more experiences and a lot more acceptance, a lot more love, and hopefully, in my experience and a lot of things that I like to study and look at, 2012 is going to be one of these years that really is the tipping point. If you pay attention to the news, if you watch a lot of TV and stuff like that, I've never seen more ghost shows and more spiritual shows and, you know, more connected shows like that than ever. It's because we're all moving in that direction. You know, the energy is changing for us. I mean, and you can get, you know, real scientific and talk about, you know, moving into the Aquarian age and moving into the photon band and, you know, the vibration of the earth speeding up, which is causing our bodies to speed up, which is causing us to feel like time is speeding up. All that information is out there. But I'm not supposed to talk about that tonight. We'll cover that later, but the information's out there that people are doing this stuff. And one of the things I want to make everybody aware of, that whatever your job is, it's number one to be who you are. Exactly who you are. And there's lots of ways I cover in my book and through my work about how to figure out, how to uncover that genuine soul, that genuine person inside of you. And a lot of that is, you know, looking at your past, looking at your parents, you know, doing the work. But as you pull that out, you'll find the things that inspire you, that give you purpose, are the exact things, the exact paths that you're supposed to take. That's your job. I talk to a lot of people about, you know, financial collapse and the government and all these things. Well, what about this? What are we going to do about that? Da, 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 da. They're worried. They're freaking out because so much is going on right now. There are people who have been divinely guided to cover these things, to do their part. So you have to focus on what you can do and what you're divinely guided to do, especially in this year and the years to come. So don't worry so much about what's going to happen. We have help. We have lots and lots of help, thankfully. But as we move forward in the coming years and everything else, your main job is to be you. And to be you for the world to see, and to come with like-minded people like this, and to spread that vibration. You know, they say, I'm not a real good Bible student, but you know, where it says, where two or more gather in my name, you know, I'll be there. That's what we're doing tonight. So, I mean, you know, kind of segueing back to your question, one of the reasons I questioned myself so much, and one of the reasons I got on this path was to try to figure all that out. And the reason I'm up here is not to teach anybody anything. It's for me in my own learning. Because I have not learned anything more successfully than when I've been working with other people. You know, I spent a lot of time judging myself, especially in the past 10 years, because I had this awareness, and I knew a bunch of things, and I thought were really neat and really good. But I couldn't really, I had a hard time applying those things in my life. And I couldn't figure it out until I started helping other people apply it in their lives. And they would get it. And I would go, oh, that's how you do it. You know, and that's how I started figuring out what I'm supposed to do. You know, and this is the path that we go on. We just stumble along and trip over things and dig, and grow. You know, we're all digging our own garden. So, are there any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if a child at age 5 is diagnosed ADHD, 2 years later have the monocle ODD added to it. A couple of years after that, said he's autistic. And just this year, at age 13, is being told he has Asperger's. Now, does that fall into that realm of indigo?
Yes. Usually, and that's a real severe kind of classic case of our antiquated system of medicine and psychology and everything else trying to shove this person into an old box. And I haven't heard of anybody quite that severe where they have been given every label before, but that's a classic example of, well, you must be this. Well, you must be this. Well, you must be this. And just trying to grab whatever characteristics of that child and go, okay, well, you're ADD, or you're OCD, you got Asperger's, or you're autistic, or, you know, the kid's a new child, an indigo or crystal child, and he doesn't fit into the system because the system is old, it's antiquated, it's linear, you know, it's kind of, you know, if you look at a simple diagram of, you know, a two-dimensional diagram, we have to have 3 dimensions to see 2 dimensions. You know, this would be 1 dimension, this would be 2 dimensions. Well, you can't be aware of 2 dimensions unless you're in 3 dimensions. Well, we got kids that are 3, you know, 3rd, 4th dimension, and we're trying to quantify them or classify them within this old system of 2 dimensions. So, be real supportive of him, because he needs all the support he can get, because this old system is telling him, well, this is wrong with you, and this is wrong with you, and that's wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with him. He just needs to find whatever works for him. You know, and a lot of the kids that are autistic nowadays are classified autistic. They're just a new generation of kids that are far more psychic. They're far more open. And one of the reasons they do fine early on, they don't speak early on, is because they communicate with their parents telepathically. And it works just fine until the kids get old enough to go out in the world and they take them to a party or something like that, and the kid's not talking. And getting frustrated because they can't hear him. And these people don't understand why this poor kid is 3 or 4 years old and isn't talking. He doesn't need to. He's just using Wi-Fi, you know. So you just have to be supportive and know that they will develop in their own time. So, I mean, if he's on medication, try to wean him off of it unless it's helpful. If it's helpful and it's actually a benefit, let him use it until he wants to get off of it. There's nothing wrong with crutches. We all use them when we break a leg, but they need to fall away at some point. So, you know, we don't want to overly judge some kids. You know, a lot of kids will need some medication to kind of function. We don't want to medicate them if we can help it. But if it actually benefits them, okay. As minimal as you can until they don't need it anymore. And I'm still torn about this because we don't need to medicate the kids because they're just fine. But if we want them to function in our society at our level, sometimes we have to kind of pull them back to our level. But the real idea and the real function of what we're trying to do as an expansive, growing, conscious society is not to pull them back to us, but for us to get up to them. So we need to take their cues and kind of move forward, which kind of leads me back to where I was going before. Can I borrow you again? Because you're the best passer of paper out that I've got here. When I'm passing out, actually, can I have one of those? I didn't make myself one.
Can she start in the back this time?
She can start wherever she likes. You didn't get any?
No, we didn't get the other.
I'm sorry, I ran out.
You start in the back.
Go ahead back there. What you're getting now is the 4 stages of human spiritual development and growth. These go hand in hand with the indigos and crystals, first waivers, you know, whatever you want to call them, whatever nomenclature you want to use. What I wrote on the front page is information I got at a channeling in Las Vegas from Eric Sudberg, who channels Archangel Sauron. And I don't know if I spelled it right, but you can probably look him up. But he did a talk about the 4 stages of human evolution. And just like school, where we have four classes or 4 grades in high school and 4 grades in college, and humankind has 4 stages of evolution. And the way I like to describe it, and the way he kind of described it, was that stage 1 people are kind of learning the rules to be human. So they come in, and they usually don't have a whole lot of ambition. They're usually kind of good, salty-earth people, and they just kind of go along and get along, so they're kind of learning the rules. You got stage 2 folks who are a little more fundamentalist. They have to have a set of rules. Usually you get a lot of your right-wingers or your Bible thumpers, or whatever term you want to slap on them in this category. They believe in black and white. They believe that there's a set of rules that we have to have. There's good and bad, right and wrong, da da da. Stage 3 people are just basically the next evolution of stage 2 people, where they've graduated from the first set of rules, and now they get the second set of rules, which are usually a little nicer. You get a lot of your kind of hippie-ish vegetarian, tree hugger, or whatever nomenclature you want to use in the stage 3 people. The only difference is they have a different set of rules. They still want you to abide by their rules and not eat meat and not do this and that and the other thing. But they still are bound by a set of rules. Now, stage 4 people, which a lot of folks here, a lot of folks in the light working community are stage 3 moving into stage 4. Stage 4 people are much more open, they're much more spiritually minded, and this is where we're all trying to go to. Now, the only reason I bring this up is that Indigo kids are already stage 4. They're already there, and we're trying to catch up with them. Now, what was interesting was, if you look past the first page, I found, what was his name? M. Scott Peck did a study, and actually I was just looking up 4 stages because I didn't expect to find anything, and I found this guy's stuff. And it's a little different, but it's basically runs along the same lines of what I was given at that channel. That there are 4 stages of human evolution, and that they go through these stages, and some people go through more than one in a lifetime, some take lifetimes through each one, but I added that in because I thought that would be a great addition to these 4 stages. I mean, we're talking about indigos, we're talking about crystals, we're talking about evolution. We should understand what stages we go through. Now, one of the things I spend a lot of time working on is perspective with people. And one of the reasons I like to talk about the 4 stages of human evolution is that perspective, in my mind, is probably one of the most important things. The right perspective, having an open perspective, knowing that perspective really colors everything. So if you're like me and you have folks in your family who aren't quite where you are and don't quite understand you, it's nice to know that, oh, well, maybe they're a stage 2 person or a stage 1 person, you know. And the main reason that I even bring this up for people is that you don't need to waste your time with people who aren't where you are. You know, there's a wonderful law, a wonderful rule, the rule of thirds. You know, no matter what you do in your life, 1/3 of people are going to love whatever you do. No matter what you do, 1/3 of people are going to hate whatever you do. No matter what you do, 1/3 of people don't care. You know, and in our society, we're basically trained to go after the 2/3. Why don't you like me? Come on, be my friend. Why don't you like me? You know you want to be my friend. Come on. We're just wasting our time. They don't care. They're not going to like us anyway. So go after your 1/3. So I bring up all of this stuff so that to give you guys a better platform. You know, it's funny because my girlfriend and I always talk about stages of people. Oh, that person's stage 2. Oh, he's classic stage 2 or stage 1 or whatever. And we had a friend go, what the hell are you talking about? So then I tried to go into explaining this. I was like, well, you know, well, depending on what stage they were, they didn't really get there. You know, some of the stage 3, 4 people, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I see where you're going with that, but, you know, and it's kind of that dimensionality thing. You know, if you're kind of stage 1, stage 2, you're kind of 1 and 2 dimensional. You know, you're stage 3, stage 4, you're a little bit brighter, a little bit more out there, so you can see a little bit more. So, as you move through life and you're going through with these people and you need time to talk to somebody, you need someone to hear you, you need someone to vent to, pick the right stage. Because, you know, there's people I go talk to, my mother's one of them. I don't talk to my dad much about it, and not because he doesn't have good advice, but if I want to know how do I pay my taxes and you know, do very 2-dimensional stuff, I'll go to him. If I want to talk about psychology or my mental problems or whatever I got going on that day, I might go talk to mom. You know, so you choose your battles in life. And the main reason is, hi, welcome. How you doing? The main reason is just because you want to make your life easier. As we grow from kids to adolescence to adulthood to middle age, we all go through a lot of stages. And our perspective changed. I mean, I can't remember the exact age ranges, but our brain chemistry actually changes about 5 times, 6 times, from 2 to 5 to 15 to 20 to 30 and all that. Your brain chemistry actually changes. So, this is 30 somethings, 40, 50 somethings, and we're talking to kids, and we're like, what are you thinking? The brain chemistry is completely different. So of course they're not thinking the same thing you're thinking, or they can't think the same way you think. You know, they think on their own level. They process information on their own level. So being aware that we have these stages we run through, and even in human evolution, we have stages we run through. One of the things I always tell people, especially when they come to me and they're seeking counseling or coaching about family problems or relationship problems or whatever, one of the first things I always try to get them to understand is that you're never really talking to anybody else. Ever. From the time the thought goes from your brain down through whatever needs to go through to come out your mouth, and you form these thoughts and you speak them, it has to go in their ear, through their auditory processor, through their brain, and then through all of their personality traits, all their conditioning, all of their mother's voices, all of their father's voices, all of the society's voices, all the morality, all the, and by the time it gets there, it's not what you said at all. So you're basically talking to yourself 99% of the time. So I don't say that to be discouraging. I just say that for you guys to be aware that there's a reason there's discord in conversation. There's a reason there's discord with folks, not because they're not just alike, because all of you are exactly the same and completely different. It's the dichotomy of being human, being eternal spiritual beings, deciding to come down here and take the ride of life. You know, we all came with a plan, but it doesn't mean we're all on the same page. So, before I go any further and ramble on anymore, does anybody have any questions on any of that? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned asking these children about their past lives.
Mm-hmm.
Can you recall your past lives, or did that fall away?
I have been pretty adamant about studying that for myself, just so I would kind of have a background and you know, I've had readings and learned about some of my past lives and stuff. It all depends on the kids. If you're asking kids about it when they're in that 3 to 7 range, and only 3 because that's usually how long it takes them to communicate very well, you know. But
I'm sorry. And does that have something to do with imaginary playmates when a child is
oh
like
yeah,
1 and
absolutely.
2?
The imaginary playmates aren't as imaginary as you think they are.
I have a little grandson, and no, it's not imaginary with him.
Yeah.
You know, he plays little games with him, chases them around the
Yeah.
yard. And
He's as real as you or me, especially to that child, and that's just, they're more dimensionally aware. You know, one of the things we're coming to learn in our science is starting to catch up. You know, we've got string theory, super string theory, multidimensional theory. We're starting to realize that this plane of existence and our functionality of what we're aware of isn't all there is. And there's unlimited dimensions. There's unlimited levels of frequency and of experience. So just because we can't see or hear it, doesn't mean that child's not actually talking to a person. And there's a lot of kids nowadays that will come up to their parents and say, Oma said da 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 da. And their parents are just, you know, Oma's been dead for 30 years. You know, because she's there. She's communicating with him because he's still open. In more advanced societies that hopefully we're moving towards, but in more advanced societies, there's not such a delineation or discrepancy between the living and the dead. You know, when people pass on, they're still aware enough and open enough that they can still communicate with them, so because they know they're not really gone. And these kids nowadays, and a lot of us are learning and realizing and remembering that imaginary friends aren't really imaginary, and that there's more out there than our 3, 6, 5 senses, you know, can actually pick up. And a lot of that is really just, the best way to kind of put it in our terms is it's a TV channel kind of thing. You know, if you're on one station, there's all these other stations going on at the same time, but you're just focused on that one station. You know, these kids have a scrambler box and then kind of go back and forth. You know, so yeah, he's got imaginary friends that are really imaginary. So, anybody else have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are there really more special children now, or are we just able to identify them better?
There is actually a higher percentage. Depending on which study you look at, and one of the reasons in the pamphlets I say that, you know, Indigo kids didn't start coming in until after 1980 or whatever, that was really when the big influx started coming in.
Why then?
Call it cosmic, call it timing, cyclical, because that's where we are in our human evolution, in our growth in consciousness. So they are coming in to basically evolve us into the next evolution of consciousness, which if you follow, a lot of the Mayan stuff or any of the precession equinox cycles of astrology, astronomy, we all go through phases. We have been going through phases. Every 2160 years is a year. And so from basically 0 AD or 1 AD to now has been the age of Pisces. And we're moving into the age of Aquarius, which they sang about in the 60s because they started figuring it out. But all of this is evolution. And I actually was going to bring a book that has a wonderful chart showing our speeding of evolution. And it has a chart, basically. I'll see if I can replicate it from memory. It looks a little bit like a Mayan temple. It's got 13 stages. And I know I'm not drawing this right. I never went to art school, I'm sorry. But basically, there's 13 stages. And if the Earth has been here 16 billion, 400 million, whatever years, this time frame would be the entire time frame. Now, the first 12 to 14 billion years was the cellular age. And cellular age, we went from, zero-celled organisms to plankton to whatever else. Then we have the mammalian stage, which was so many billions of years where mammals, developed. Then we have familial stage, and then on up to industrial, and then cosmic and universal. And each one of these stages went from this one being, say, 12 billion years, on up to the last one was 2011, was 11 months. So we're all evolving and evolving at a much more rapid pace, which is one of the reasons these kids are coming in at such more frequency. There's so much more of them coming in now. It's because, yes, ma'am.
Isn't it true that the new souls that are being born are coming through, women are coming through, are the new souls that are going to change our way of thought, our rhythm of life?
Yeah.
Like, it's going to help us all to learn. And they're actually spirits, these children you're talking about. They actually see, some of them can see, they're like seers, they can see. And they'll nurture us as we learn. And then it's like
So they get her pamphlets.
in evolution, it's the evolution still going through.
Yeah, you came in a little late. We talked about indigos and crystals, and that was pretty much the first part of the talk about, and that's who these new kids are, and that's why they're coming in is to advance our evolution, and that's one of the reasons we don't want to try to shove them in the old box. Yes, ma'am.
The kids of the 60s and early 70s, are they just early indigos? Because they took, we were lucky they threw out all that bullshit that we had to put up with.
Oh, yeah.
And we could be us, and if we wanted to wear a long dress or no dress or whatever, we could do it.
They were kind of the first experiment in delving into the new evolution, into the more aware state that we were trying to move into. And like most good experiments, you try it and you go, it's kind of too hard. We'll come back to that later. And that's kind of what happened. They came in and decided that it was a little too much in there. But that was kind of the first story. If you listen to Dolores Cannon at all, and you can go on YouTube and find some of her stuff, and she's been around forever. She talks about first waivers and second waivers and stuff. And a lot of the first waivers she works with, and she does like post-hypnotic transgression. She does like hypnotic transgression and brings them back to where, and she is amazing because she doesn't take them back to early in their life or their past life. She goes in between lives and talks to them then, where they were planning their next lives, and they're talking about what they're planning on doing and why they're going there. And it's always about growth and helping us on our evolution towards the next phase of life. And she talks about first waivers. She says she had such a problem working with so many first waivers when they first came in because they all came in, they followed the rules. They got married, they had kids, they got a job, they all wanted to commit suicide.
Yeah.
You know, and she had a lot of people like that because they did everything they were supposed to do, and they were miserable. Then you got the second waivers coming in, which I'm probably one of those. That came in after them, going, okay, you kind of mowed the grass, now we're gonna blaze the path. You know, so they kind of set the stage for us. So each stage, just kind of like our stage in evolution, they compact and compress, and they get more and more and more, what's a good word, potent, I guess would be a good word, I don't know. You know, they come in more and more condensed, more and more compact, and mainly because the stew is right. You know, the world is right, the energy is right. And one of the funny things is that as we've been moving into the photon band, which, depending on which study you look at, in 1987, we had the cosmic convergence or whatever, we started moving into the photon band, which Barbara Hanclow, who wrote several books, Pleiadian Agenda is one that she talks about. She channels the Pleiadians, so there's something else to write down the back there for you to look at. But she channels Pleiadians, and they talk about how our solar system moves in and out of the photon band every 11,000 years, which is interesting because when you look at fossil record, every 11,000 years it seems to be a jump in evolution. You know, David Wilcock was doing an interview and he was talking about, you know, fossils. And we are on this Darwinian kind of, which that's kind of moving out, but we've been on this Darwinian evolution theory of survival of the fittest, and we evolved from age to da. Well, if you look at the fossil record and the best fossil records in the sea, we went, you know, the fish went from shellfish to bony fish. There was never a half shellfish, half bony fish. There wasn't a half crab, flipper shark thing. They just went from shellfish to bony fish. You know, where was the in between? And that's, you know, part of that, the 80s thing of the missing link. You know, where's our missing link? How do we go from monkeys to humans? We had help, a lot of help. There's 7 different kinds of alien DNA or whatever within us because we're an amalgam of the universe. But that's how there was no missing link. That's how we haven't found it, because we didn't just one day, you know, it wasn't a chimpanzee that had a baby that was human. It doesn't happen. You know, chimpanzees have chimpanzees, dogs have dogs, we have people, we have humans. And since '87, we've been moving more and more. I think we've increased into the photon band 2 weeks every year. And so after 2012, we're supposed to be fully immersed in the photon band. You know, global warming, time speeding up, all these things can be contributed to that, which is interesting. People go, what's global warming? Global warming is because of greenhouse gases and stuff like that. Well, the same phenomenon happened 11,000 years ago, and 9,000 years ago. What were they driving back then? You know, pollution that caused greenhouse gases that caused us to heat up. If you listen to David Wilcock and some of his studies and his presentations, all of our planets in our solar system are heating up. And the funniest thing about that is, the further out they go, the hotter they're getting, the more they're heating up. So that has nothing to do with, you know, global warming for us. That's all about the energy coming from the center of the universe, moving into the photon band. One of the reasons we have these leaps in evolution every 11,000, every 26,000 years. You know, these are things that are cyclical. That's why the Mayans are so popular right now, because they were big mathematicians, and you know, they put their calendar down and then they stopped. And we're all going, okay, they stopped. Now what? You know, and so a lot of folks are going, oh no, the end of the world is coming, end of the age. If you like, you know, biblical mythology, if you like a lot of the allegories of the Bible, look up Dr. Rocco DeErico. He still speaks Aramaic. There's still communities in California speak Aramaic. Has translated a lot of the old Aramaic text, and has realized that a lot of the old text has been mistranslated. When it went from Aramaic to Jewish to English to, you know, through all these different languages, there have been some, and it's not a lot, there's just some key words that have been mistranslated. And aeon was one of them, you know, and they translated that to word, but it's not word, to world. Well, it actually doesn't mean world, it means age. And they were just talking about us moving from the age of high season to the age of Aquarius. You know, he'll be with us until the end of the age. And that's all they're really talking about is the cycles of the cosmos, the cycles of the universe. And they were able to predict these things 5, 10, 15,000 years ago. Who's next? Any questions? No? Yes, sir.
Who was the name of the man you were talking about?
Which one?
Just recently.
David Wilcock?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Rocco Erico.
Oh, Rocco DeErico.
Oh.
Rocco DeErico has actually, I think he came to the center at one point and did a talk, but he's fabulous. I've seen him in Sedona a couple times, and he works with a lot of these communities that still speak Aramaic, and he has written several books on the original translations of the Bible, the mistranslations of the Bible, and to hear this man talk is amazing because he will change one word. You know, and I can't remember any of the stuff off the top of my head right now, but just the changing of that one word changes everything. So,
Temple.
is that?
Temple, you know, and he used the word temple is.
I remember
we
one
think
of them was a camel
church.
through the eye of the needle,
Mhm.
but I can't remember when you changed the word,
Right.
it made a lot more sense.
Yeah, there was one about being perfect. You know, be perfect by I am perfect, and I think that's what it was changed to. So I can't remember what it was supposed to be. There's a lot of things like that that we're coming to realize with the Indigo kids coming out, with a lot of the extra photons, a lot of the energy speeding up, with all the stuff that's happening, all these changes. We're starting to realize that a lot of things we were told may not have been correct. And so we're having to relearn a lot of things. We're having to relearn how to deal with our kids, we're having to relearn how to read our history, and we're going to have to relearn how to do community. Which is, you know, that's why I love coming to do these things. I get to see people in my community. You know, we get to talk and have conversations. Which I would like to have a conversation. Talk to me.
I want her to finish what she had to say.
Twyla?
Yeah, me too. What did Twyla, what were you saying, Twyla?
So many words and even just a period that meant something, but they talk about the vessel, which is the egg, which is the uterus, the shape of it, but the temple is like we think of as church, pay homage to the temple. It's not a church like it, you know, like pay money to the church. It's taking care of the physical body, or what you put into the solar plex.
Mhm.
Just that one phrase. And another one was amen.
Mhm.
That's a permanent dot, and amen is and so that it is. Instead of, we say a beautiful prayer and end it in amen, which stops it instead of saying and so that it is what it means in Arabic.
Yeah.
Seek the kingdom of God.
Right.
You know, that's actually just simply seek your own wisdom.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's one of the things that,
The kingdom of God is within you.
yeah, it's always an inside job. It's always an inside, and that's why people like me are becoming so much more popular nowadays, because we tell people and help people figure out that it's their job to deal with. Yeah. But
What do we call those old farts that are the baby boomers that were born in 1961 that were going through all this stuff? You know, we weren't indigos or anything. We were just baby boomers, but we're a lot more than that because you know we were going through all this stuff that. You know, we're going
if you
through
need
now.
a label, if you need
We
something
need a
to read
label,
over,
like phase 1 person or
light worker. I mean, we're all light workers, and there's different classes, different phases of light worker. But you know, a lot of the ones they would call, before, say the Indigos before, you know, a lot of baby boomers, they're just usually light workers. You know, it's just not necessarily a necessary label, but that's who we are. We're all light workers.
Reading that website that we discussed, it described it as what you just asked, if I remember correctly, that they were the first wave of the transition, and they were kind of, you know, they were paving the way for the boom in '87.
Which is funny, if you look back in history, we have different, you know, we have the Renaissance, we have the Dark Ages, things like that. But those things lasted hundreds of years. We have the baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, double D. You know, and these things are happening quicker and quicker and quicker. You know, everything's changing quicker and quicker. The time. It's 5 minutes, okay. So in 5 minutes, we're all going to take a break, you get to stretch your legs, and do whatever you need to do.
I'm going to give you a twist also with the name. Lord means law.
Yeah.
And a lot of people refer to that as Jesus or God. But the real translation for Lord is long.
Yeah, law.
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 Yeah. And there's 3 universal laws you always have to keep in mind, and in the second half we'll do a lot of, perspective, law of attraction talking, and do some work that, and maybe do some personal work with some of you, but I gotta make sure I remember this. The 3 universal laws are your energy. You cannot die. Energy just changes form. So when you change bodies, you're changing your suit. You don't die, you just change form. So you are eternal. There's only 2 things that exist. That which exists and that which doesn't. You either exist or you don't. So if you don't, you're here. You're breaking the rules. You get back what you put out. So you have the law of attraction. What you put out is what you get back. And actually, I think that was the 3. You are energy. You are eternal, and you get it back what you put out. So, these are things to keep in mind as we move along, because as we move into law of attraction, a lot of folks they get frustrated. And the main reason we get frustrated as we move on into it, and I'll just give this to you since we have to take a break to mull over. To get to where you want to go, you got to clean out what was already there. And all of us are, for lack of a better term, hoarders. We hoard our experiences, we hoard our memories, we hoard our feelings. And we have to, a lot of times, get through these. So a lot of times when we start on the path of using law of attraction, of trying to use the universal laws to our benefit, we feel like it's not working, because these old things are coming up for us to deal with. So as we move forward and go on this, just think about what has been coming up for you, especially if you've been studying law of attraction or studying, a lot of this new agey stuff, and going, why doesn't it work for me? I thought positively, and I did this, and I said this prayer, I did this yoga, and my back hurts, and it's not working. You have to clean out the house to move forward. Is that a good place to stop? All right, well, everybody get up and go have water, take a break, and we'll come back in how long? 5 minutes? Make it 10 minutes?
Tell them 5 because it'll be 10.
Okay.
If you give them 10, it's going to be 20.